and welcome to The Right Idea, where we discuss the people, policy, and politics that drive Texas. I'm your host, Brian Phillips. I'm the Chief Communications Officer at the Texas Public Policy Foundation. And with me, as always, is Derek Cohen, our Chief of Research. All right, Derek, last night was the State of the Union. Did you watch it? Stay up for all 17 hours of it? Did you watch the whole thing?
Oh, I must not have had the paid subscriber version. I think the one I watched only went 2.5.
2.5 hours, but it was probably a 30-minute speech, right?
Yeah.
It was about a 30-minute speech, but it took 2 hours to
Yeah,
watch
one of those well-known Trump tight 30-minute speeches. I watched it. I thought it was, I'm a general anti-State of the Union guy. But I actually thought it did really good steering into a strength, specifically highlighting, I thought, obviously it was for, political show, but I thought that it was a really good touch with the executive order on the Gulf. I thought it was a really good touch with the kid in the Secret Service, and I thought it was a really good touch with the young man going to West Point.
Yeah, watching the kid give the Secret Service guy a hug it's getting dusty in here.
Yeah.
It's getting dusty in here. But to your earlier point about it being kind of a hot mess, that is the subject of our hot take today. Should the State of the Union go back to being a written message to Congress? That is traditionally how it has always been. Here's some stats for you, just a little context. Jefferson did give the State of the Union in person. Washington did give the State of the Union in person, but Jefferson stopped that practice. He was our third president, stopped that practice. So from him all the way until Woodrow Wilson, it was given, for all kinds of reasons. But it was given, but it was done by writing, and they presented it to Congress, and you could read it. And in fact, that's kind of what I do. I don't watch them anymore just because of all the theater. I go back and read the transcript. So should we go back to writing in person? It was Wilson who, should we go back to writing? It was Wilson who then brought it back to doing it in person in front of Congress in 1913. It was Calvin Coolidge who first did the State of the Union, was broadcast on the radio, and it was Harry Truman who did the first broadcast on TV. Since then, it has been on TV, except for one time in 1981, Carter submitted it as a written document to Congress because he had just gotten trounced by Reagan and decided, he was done with D.C. So should we go back to a written document?
Well, let nobody say that we've never praised Jimmy Carter on this show. So the one thing he did good, that was going back to the written. No, I think we should actually go beyond that. So if you look at the origin of the State of the Union, it says in the Constitution that the president shall from time to time advise the Congress of the State of the Union. I think that should be not only reflective of, the current time that we're in, but it also should be respective of Congress's time when they're not recording Kendrick Lamar's Not Like Us videos and putting them on TikTok.
That's so cringy.
That's a whole nother thing.
Whole nother hot take.
Yeah. But no, so what President Trump should do towards the end of his term, just text a couple emojis to the speaker and the majority leader in the Senate, and just, it'll be like the dollar sign with wings, probably a boat for the Panama Canal. I don't know, like a corn thing if, like some of these subsidy inversions are going on, a whole bunch of other things, and then just let them figure it out. And I think that would actually capture the zeitgeist of
so
the time.
Not even just like some tweets, go from tweets, just go straight emojis.
Oh, well, I was gonna say back in my day, we only had 140 character limit. Then before Elon purchased it, it went up to 280. But now if you got the check mark, you can just write a book on there.
Yeah.
What's the purpose of that? You know who else posts that long on social media? My aunt, and she puts up Minion memes on Facebook.
It's just become, it's all theater now. I mean, people were holding up signs last night. I saw a bunch of pictures. I mean, it's the cameras are on and they're looking for that kind of thing. So it's become, political theater even more than it already was.
Let me push back on you. And if we are going to do it, we are going to have it recorded. The party of the president gets to control it, but the party, the minority party, then gets to pick the producer and a special effects guy.
Oh, this sounds bipartisan.
Well, here's the thing. Well, I mean, it's bipartisan, but B, you're also going to have a vested interest in production value. So I'm thinking like Michael Bay stuff, right? And so you're going to get it there, and you're just going to have all these like just needless explosions. Which, I mean, that they do the whole thing where they walk down and do the handshakes. Explosions there would tighten that part up real quick.
Actually, I like that idea a lot because that means that conservatives would be in charge, which is what I want, but I want the left in charge of the entertainment and the production and all the best, the best producers and directors.
And that's all they want to do now anyway, is just be a bunch of clowns. So
I like it. Well, there you go. We solved the problem. That's how you fix the State of the Union. I love it. All right. Shameless plug, as always, for our newsletter. It's called The Post. You can get it at texaspolicy.com/The Post. It's a fantastic newsletter. I write a little exclusive piece at the beginning of it, but the really important stuff is kind of what we're working on and all the biggest stories of the week. And there's always something fun, something a little Texas related at the end. So if you're not subscribing to The Post, please do. texaspolicy.com/The Post. Okay, let's get to our interview. We took a week off from school choice, last week. We had Jason Isaac on to tell us about energy.
No, he brought that back to school choice.
And he did bring it back to school. That's why I said because he still brought it back to school choice. But we are back, and we are back big time because the House is, I guess, about a week away, less than a week away, from considering HB 3, which is the bill that would create the education savings accounts. It is the number one issue in the legislature this year. It is the number one issue for the governor. It was the number one issue in the election last year, at least the elections here in Texas last year. And so here we are. The Senate has already done what it has done 6 times before, and it has passed its education savings account. So it is on to the House, where things are very, very different over there. And here to get into it with us is TPPF's K-12 Education Policy Director, Jorge Borrego. George, this is your inaugural visit to the right idea. So thanks for being on.
I'm very excited for it. Thank you for having me, to both of you.
Well, I hate that you have to go after Jason because Jason is just super high energy and funny and all of that.
That's one way to describe him, yeah.
So you're going to have to pick it. Yeah, you're going to have to pick up where we left off last week.
I love Jason. And, we've connected a lot on the workforce angle and how school choice really benefits, especially the oil and gas producing parts of our state, which is basically the whole entire state. So I love me some Jason Isaac.
So he made that point last week, trying to bring everything back to school choice, even our energy policy. All right, well, let's get into HB 3. Let's talk about, I want to talk about, I want to get into the bill because so much of what's online or in the media is just, are essentially dumbed down descriptions, a lot of them misleading. They're still using the word voucher, even though that's not a voucher, and ESA is not a voucher. So let's get into it from your perspective, who's a person who, worked on the bill, who's evaluated it, who knows all the ins and outs. What are the real highlights for you in terms of what the bill is and how it works? I mean, I think that's mostly what our audience is looking for, and getting a lot of questions about that. Like, okay, let's say I apply for the ESA and I get it. Like, what is it and how does it work?
Yeah. Well, first off, I want to start with the point that you brought up here. Yeah, there's so much misinformation online and by this really organized groups that are just pushing a bunch of lies to get people to be afraid of what is going to be transformative policy that's going to better the educational outcomes of all our children here in Texas. And, a key word to always know if you're being fed misinformation is if they're using the word voucher, because this is not a voucher, right? It's an education savings account. But they know that they've done so much research. They know that the idea of voucher and the idea from back from the 90s is so unpopular that they could just use that to spin an argument that's in their favor. But now getting to the actual truth of the matter, how this program will work. Well, so what makes both SB2 and HB3 unique and better than any other piece of legislation in the country is the implementation process. So most states, when they pass an ESA program, they usually within 3 months they go from the law being signed by the governor into the first students entering the program. That's a really short turnaround.
Sure, yeah.
But for a program the size of Texas, which we're looking at 100,000 students, we're going to quadruple that. We're going to go out for a year-long implementation process. So the idea would be Governor Abbott signs it into law sometime this late spring, and by September 1st, the comptroller starts working on the rules and starts getting the application process online and going. Parents can apply by the fall. By the spring of the following year, they get a notification saying, hey, your child has been accepted into the ESA program. Based off your application, you're a general education student, you're awarded, if we're following HB3, you're awarded a little bit over $10,000 for this first year. Then they could use those funds starting early summer. And this is all going to be finalized under rulemaking. But that's
so if I hear just a recap, okay, if we pass it this year, then the first students using ESAs will be going into school in 2027.
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
Got it. All right.
For the, 2020. So it'd be next year, 2026 to following that 2026-2027 school year.
Yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Oh, so fall of 2026.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I thought you meant that we're going to wait a year and then be able to apply.
So the implementation process would be from this summer up until the following summer.
Okay.
So that'd be all working out the whole application, and then
Got
the
it.
first students will go in, which is different than, like, let's take a state like Iowa, which literally in 30 or 60 days they went from, law was signed into law, then first students have to get into the door within 60 days, which is for a program this size is
what worked for an
be
Iowa
extraordinary.
size program.
Yes, yeah.
Well, and that's a good point. I mean, we've heard the lieutenant governor say at our big policy summit a couple weeks ago, said that when this passes, it will be the largest launch of a school choice program in the history of the country.
Yeah.
Which is, hey, we're Texas, everything's bigger here, right?
Yeah, I really want to hit on that point. Then the second largest program launch was around 18,000 students.
Wow.
So we are 5x that.
Wow.
So that is huge. And as a native born Texan, we love going big here in the state, and I love to see
first.
it. Yeah, I love to see it. We couldn't be first across the line to pass it into law, but we're going to be the first in terms of size.
And then when California passes one, then they'll be that'll never happen.
Yeah.
So we're not in any danger of losing that stature once it passes and once it gets launched. Well, that's really smart. I think I think that's a great. I'm glad you highlighted that, because I don't think people understand that this is going to be complicated. It's not the easiest thing in the world. It's easy to understand, but in terms of the mechanics, it can be complicated, and that they're not going to rush it. That they're not going to rush into something.
Yeah. I guess going a little bit more deeper into how this program would work, right? So we kind of talked about the application process, getting your child in. A question I hear all the time is, well, how do I select a private school? Is my school going to be covered, or is my curriculum going to be covered? So getting into those specifics, one, if going on the private school side, if you're attending a accredited private school, which if you attend, let's just say St. Mary's down the street, or any other private school or classical Christian school, the odds are that is an accredited school. You will be awarded the full ESA amount of $10,000. That school would be automatically approved as a provider because they are accredited, and it would just be up to the decision of that school to actually opt into the program and say, yes, we want to start taking those ESA dollars. Most private schools across the state have signaled that they'd be interested in opting in right away, and that would kind of be the process as far as getting new schools on board. And the same thing with the curriculum. If you're a homeschool family, and most of the because we have the benefit of being 34th in the country. Most of these curriculums exist in other states. We will be able to use a lot of those examples from other states to show that these are already or non-fraudulent curriculum matters, and they would be pre-approved for the program, and you'd be able to get that covered under your ESA.
So that's it then. We're going to roll out the program, start applying next spring, I guess. You'll find out before the summer or around the summer if you get in, and then once you get in, you get to pick your school, and we're off and running.
Yeah, that's essentially it. And, we cover transportation, books, materials, certain hardware, as long as it's required for the course. Tuition and fees is a big one. Uniforms. Yeah, the House bills really got the whole, they thought of everything on that side.
I want to bring it up because I think it was a good point, and I think this has not been part of the production or part of the discussion so far. So much of the left's push against this, it's all AstroTurf. We don't need to qualify that. It's absolutely all AstroTurf. And one of the prop groups are the ones that claim to represent disabled children. I take great offense to that. Can you explain how the funding mechanism countenances disabled children, not for the prioritization up front, but then for the actual funding for special needs services?
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree. I know, Derek, you and I have talked about this, but I serve on the board of a Down Syndrome Association in College Station. And, a lot of our members, especially in rural areas, they don't always get adequate services, or they have to travel really far distances a lot, especially for really rural communities. They share one single service one single service facility for multiple school districts. Now, to answer your question on how they're prioritized, so under the House's plan, the first kids prioritized would be those students with a disability whose parents make under $160,000 a year. Right. So that includes, that captures low income, middle class families. If your mom is a teacher and your dad's a police officer, you will be covered and you'll be first in line. On the funding side, because we want to make sure that these students aren't getting a decrease in the service that they are.
It costs more money to educate a special needs child.
Exactly. Yeah. So the state has a very robust schedule to assign the how much funding a child gets in the public school space. What we will do, and this is where what the program will do, is look at how much money they are entitled to in the public school space, and they'll count that towards an ESA. So if you're a special needs child that gets $26,000, your ESA amount will be $26,000. Only up to the limit of $30,000, and that really does capture up to some of the most high need students with disability.
Mm-hmm. Like if you need like a full-time pair or something like that. That's
exactly.
But that's awesome that they're putting in that level of I would say that depth of thought into this particular policy.
And Derek, you said it was offensive. It's also, using special needs as a prop group. It's also deeply, deeply untrue.
Right.
We were seeing this. This was one of the weekly attacks on the school choice bill, that special needs kids will be left behind. If you go to the Texas Private School Association, they actually have an entire page of information about if you have a special needs child and you want to go to a private school. They have a list of no less than 46 private schools listed on their website that are, quote, known for their focus on special education. So this is, that is completely made up. I mean, that whole push against the special ed issue is completely fabricated.
Well, it's where they're trying to get the camel's nose under the tent. It's that not every private school does, because these entities are, well, first of all, they don't have their hand in your pocket because you don't pay property taxes to private schools, but they also aren't necessarily big enough to sustain that as part of the population. So you have a bit of a division of labor as well. Mm-hmm. But look at the Rise Academy, for example. We have schools, private schools dedicated to special needs kids, ones with lines out the door and around the block of folks trying to get in. So I think it's, again, we don't need to impugn motives here because we all know exactly what's going on. But, I think it's just, cockroaches scurrying away from the fire here.
So I want to keep going on prioritization. You mentioned special needs, and then low-income and middle-income families are going to be prioritized from that. But then it opens up after that, and it truly is universal. Every family will be eligible to apply, which is different. I know people make a big deal about that. This doesn't mean that all 5.8 million kids are going to have school choice next year. It means every family is eligible to apply, which is still a big deal. That's not how programs are launched. That's not how most programs are launched. In fact, any of the programs that are universal right now are programs that have been around for decades, and that they were upgraded or reformed to become universal. So the fact that Texas is launching as a universal program is still a very, very big deal.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. You look at Arizona or Florida, they started either as low income or special needs programs. And then once that was proven to have a really long track record of success for those specialized populations, they opened it up and made it universal eligibility for all other students. And, we have the benefit now of seeing decades of success, and we don't have to have the same incrementalist approach. We could start from level 3, like Arizona and Florida.
Yeah. Now, look, we're not just doing school choice for the sake of doing school choice, just to feel good about having a universal program or having more choice. I mean, I think that is a good point, that parents should have as much choice as possible, and that they should have every right to decide what's best for their kids. I think just principally those are all good ends in and of themselves. But it's also about improving the quality of education that the kids are getting, and letting parents make those decisions, that if they're not getting served by their assigned school, that they have the opportunity opportunity. And so can you talk a little bit about maybe other states' experiences or studies or reports or research or whatever that you've seen in other states, particularly like Florida and Wisconsin and Arizona, that have had school choice programs for a long time, and what their results have been in terms of improving student outcomes?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the most famous case and what really put school choice on the map is Florida, right? They started back with their with a scholarship program just for low income students, and this is back 20 years ago. And what they saw was, at the time, they were the lowest ranked school under the nation's report card, right? So federal government, or NAEP, this organization, they compared different educational outcomes by states. They all give the same exam, so they have a clear comparison. And Florida, for their low-income students, ranked dead last. And that really encouraged the legislature at the time to say we needed something specialized for these children, because they're being left behind. And so they launched this program. You fast forward 20 years of growth in the program, it becomes the most, a huge reason why Ron DeSantis ends up flipping the state and becomes the governor of Florida, is that you have a bunch of low income moms who love this program and said, we are so in favor of school choice that we will support anyone, whether they are Republican or Democrat, if it means that more people have access to a school choice program here in the state. And now going into the actual numbers of it, what you see is within the low income population in Florida, they go from being dead last to being number one in the country in the span of 20 years. It is a true miracle, unlike, this country is really not seen within this very narrow subgroup.
World News or U.S. News and World Report has Florida ranked, I think it was last year, had Florida ranked overall for education, which includes higher ed and everything, number one overall in the country for education. And then K through 12 was ranked fourth overall. And so, it doesn't, and we'll get to a study that literally just came out today, which we'll get to this point a little bit. But it doesn't just improve education for the kids who are in the school choice program. It improves education, at least as we've seen in Florida, for kids overall.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely true. And when you kind of think about why that's the case, why schools benefit overall, the first one is competition, right? Competition is integral to the American experiment, right? That is part of the reason why we as Americans innovate so much, is because we have a fundamental spirit of competition within our value system here. So schools compete to have better programs. They have to actually listen to parents. So that improves it from the program provider standpoint. But also, when you look at the funding aspect of it as well, right? If students end up going into a school choice program, that means, especially in those really low income areas or more urban areas, those student to teacher ratios start to improve. Most of the time, the federal money gets left behind, or there's also state-based allotments that get left behind. So those schools per pupil spending actually goes up a little bit too. So they get the benefit of having a lower teacher to student ratios, and they get more funding per student. So it's really a win-win.
Derek, let's shift to the fun part here, which is debunking the ridiculous myths that we've already done a couple here on the prioritization and others. What's your favorite? What's your favorite school choice myth that's out there?
There's so many good ones, but I'd have to. It looks like this. Ironically, you'll notice my choice of metaphor. The fourth down Hail Mary that they seem to be throwing up, that school choice will completely eradicate high school football, which, don't get me wrong, if Florida's been doing this for 20 years, George and I are football guys, I think we can say I'm 90% sure that Florida still has high school football. Oh, yeah. I haven't talked to my buddy Nick Saban anytime recently, but noted Alabama Pipeline State, Florida during his tenure there. I'm pretty sure still has high school football. Is that right?
Oh, no, that's absolutely right. And some of the best in the country, right?
Well, being from Ohio, we have a bit of a rivalry. Whatever, it's fun. It's fine, whatever.
You're in Texas
No,
now.
it's school choice.
No, and that's not dogging on Texas high school football either. But I mean, you look at how many players from the SEC come from Florida schools, right?
Right.
And so again, that is a very great example of that. Friday Night Lights are here to stay, and they're going to keep coming. And that school choice has nothing to do about that.
That's definitely my favorite lie, because then they find these useful idiots, and I use that in a classic sense, not saying that these people are idiots or that they're useful in any way, but then to write these pieces about how it's going to get rid of it, and it just where the rubber meets the road, this is not reality.
I took particular umbrage to that particular myth, and I'll spare I did a deep dive into the top 50 schools, the top 50 ranked schools in the nation, and I'll spare a lot of the details, but basically the headline is that there are more top 50 schools from school choice states. There are 28 of the top 50 come from school choice states, and 22 come from non-school choice states. So there's a majority of the best teams in the country are in states where there is school choice.
But zooming down on that, though, even because I remember when we played Cleveland St. Ignatius, that was not a fun trip across the top of Ohio. And so it's, even private schools are able to have these programs. So it's that's the ultimate red herring.
Yeah. And the other knock was that, this is going to encourage all the best players to then go play at private schools. That, of course, was debunked as well, because you have infamously anti-school choice California. And of the 6 schools that were included on the top 50, 4 of them were private. So you have a non-school choice state in which the prevalence of the best schools were already private schools.
You got to love how they go from one side of the argument and then they completely argue against that point that they just made.
Yeah.
If it seems like it benefits them to make that other counterpoint.
I'm glad you segued that, because my favorite myth outside of the football one is that school choice defunds. School choice will defund our public education system, and that they make the dual argument of this is going to defund public schools, and yet rural schools there is no private school out there. So if there's no private school for them to go to, how would that take money away from the system?
It's the Yogi Bear. I think nobody goes there. It's too crowded.
But I'll let you. There are so many angles to the defunding myth that I want to. How do you approach that when people start making that argument?
Well, I mean, the first lie you always hear is that the state only provides $6,100 per student, which is the most. And again, no amount of facts that you throw at them, and you use LBB or TEA data, and you say, well, no, here's quite literally they're being funded at between $15,000 to $16,000. Some districts get up to $22,000 per student, and then they'll say, no, well, that's not what we meant. We meant specifically the state. And then you show and say, well, this district in particular, the state gives them $15,000. The local share is only $2,000. So it's like, anything that you throw at them, it's just they always find another excuse or another talking point. Now, on the defunding aspect of it, when we look at every state that has implemented school choice program, first year, you're looking at less than 1% of students go from a public school into the school choice program within the first year. It takes some time to get some growth, but even in states that have had school choice programs for over 30 years, you're talking about 5% of the student population. If you are in a system that is afraid of a 1% decline in student enrollment, then that's not you got bigger problems than defunding or this fear of defunding. The second point to that is every time the legislature meets, their school districts get more money appropriated to them, right? Chairman Buckley, along a bill that he heard yesterday, in the House side is a bill that HB2 that contemplates over $8 billion in new funding for schools. If we look at the rural school piece, that's over $1,200 in per student for every student as in the rural school. That's just from one funding allotment. If you add all the other allotments, you're talking about an extra $1,600 per student in these schools.
And the biggest, and we've shown the video here on the program, but the biggest piece that we haven't mentioned is overall education funding. I mean, the idea that we are defunding schools, public schools. The one number we haven't mentioned is the $93 billion that we spent last year on public education. Now, this is a $1 billion program that's not coming from the permanent school fund. So it's completely different fund. So it's not, even if it can't possibly defund. It's not literally not coming from that pot of money. Right. So the defunding thing doesn't make any sense. But then the idea that we're defunding education after we spent $93 billion last year, and to your point, if we add another $8 billion, we're going to be up over $100 billion that is going to fund our public schools. And yet they, without any shame at all, will go out there and say that we are defunding public education, which is complete and total nonsense.
Absolutely, yeah. So last year, $93 billion. This year, in April, we'll get those audited numbers from TEA for this most recent school year. On that school year, we're estimating we're at $100 billion already. Then, as you mentioned, so we're actually closer to $110 billion coming through.
Off.
Yeah, and that's before we start talking about the funding on the bond side of things.
Yeah, oh gosh.
Yeah, so
careful. James Quintero might literally manifest if you say that too much.
You talk about the bonds. Derek, any other fun myths that you want to hit on?
It's the only one, and I think we all hit the highlights. But I think just the one, as we close out this segment, probably be the no testing, which is absolutely absurd. Of course, they try to use it. You talk about when they're using it two ways. They're like, oh, well, it's completely unaccountable because homeschoolers don't have to take a standardized test, and it's like, okay, like we need to make homeschoolers take a standardized test. Okay. Then it's like, oh my God, they're trying to standardize test homeschoolers.
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, I mean, I think that's where if you read the bill and see what Chairman Buckley and Chairman Creighton have provided for, I think you see that if you are homeschooling your children, that you're in a pretty great spot when it comes to having your, I would say, your preferred curriculum preserved. And not only that, but that they're not going to come testing your kids. So,
and that's just the larger question of accountability, George, which is how do we it is a legitimate concern that if we're going to use tax dollars, that they be given to organizations of any kind, whether that's some transportation vendor or some whatever or a private school, to make sure that they are using these tax dollars wisely. In the larger, broader context of accountability, what do you say to a parent who's concerned that, or a taxpayer, not even just a parent, a taxpayer who says, we're giving a bunch of money to private schools. How do we know that it's being used for the right purpose?
Well, first, I'd always point out that the number one accountability is the parent themselves. If they don't like what the educational setting that they're in, they have the option to move, and they'll have the true option, unlike a lot of parents do now, where they won't have to sell their home and move to a different part of town. They could just take their student to another place. Now, if we're going to go a little bit further, a little deeper into that, we talk about the accreditation process, and we talk about for a ESA recipient to get the full $10,200 of the ESA under HB 3. They have to go to an accredited private school, and these accreditation processes aren't it's not filling out a simple Google form and submitting it to their accreditor. It's a multi-year process. We're talking about 5 or 6 year process to become accredited, and those accreditation standards are pretty tough. Most accreditors, I'm gonna use an acronym, TPPF accredited organizations, and that's the Texas Public School Education Accrediting Association. But they have extraordinarily high standards of their member institutions. I'll give you an example. For their teacher standards, they require their accrediting bodies or subsidiaries to meet or exceed the standards placed on public school teachers. Right? Not saying that they have to do the same testing and curriculums as the public school teachers, but those standards have to be at or above what they are on the public side. Same thing with the curriculum. Curriculum has to be high quality, and that's all ran through either, let's say, the Catholic school accreditor or the Baptist school accreditor or the classical school accreditor. There's so much that goes into the checks and balances of everything.
Yeah, and the other side of that coin is, as in the same breath as people are complaining about, is there enough accountability going on, are completely ignoring that there is almost no accountability in our current public school system, particularly amongst parents who would like to leave and yet can't because they can't afford to leave their job or they can't afford to homeschool. Like, where all these people screaming about accountability in private schools, where's their demand for accountability in our current public school system?
They're not backed by groups that profit off of it, so they probably just don't care.
Yeah, or anytime the state tries to put accountability metrics on school districts and schools, they end up suing, and that's blocked for 5-6 years, even though they were originally supportive of the A through F rating system.
On the testing, they're complaining. Well, why don't they have to take the STAR? Why don't the private schools have to take the STAR and then turn around and say we should get rid of the STAR? We should get rid of the and the A through F. They're suing about the A through F system. And the STAR system and all of that. So private schools need accountability, but no accountability for us. And not to mention, what is the issue? Like, are there some studies that I'm not aware of that shows that private school kids are not getting an adequate education? I mean, I just did a quick search through the various reports recently, getting ready for this, and by and large, private school kids always end up, particularly when they always end up doing better, particularly when they take standardized tests like the SAT, where everybody has to take the same test. The kids who are in private schools generally do better than the kids who are in public schools.
Let me go ahead and add that one little piece and component, because the first complaint that someone would say, or a rebuttal to that would be like, well, those are the wealthiest students. Of course, they're going to perform so much better, as if poor kids can't, perform good on the test. But even when you adjust for income, for race, and any other kind of socioeconomic factor, they still perform well. They still perform better and outperform outperform public schools on these standardized tests, right? And it all just goes back to parents deciding what fits best for their child. Yeah. Right. And
I'm not using that to criticize public schools, because there's a lot of things that go into that, right? I mean, they do have to take special needs kids or they do have, discipline problems and all kinds of things that happen at schools. So that's not a criticism of them. But the point is, it's not a problem. Like the issue of accountability and making sure that private schools are teaching our kids what they need to know to go on to get, to have careers and go to college. There's no indication that there's a problem at private schools that needs to be addressed.
Well, I guarantee the first private school that matriculates a class that'll bomb out on the SAT won't be a private school all that much longer.
That's right. Exactly. Yeah. To your earlier point, parents would have pulled their kids out of that school, almost immediately. All right. So that's HB3. Give us just a wrap up there. And I hope you stick around. We're going to do our 10-minute drill, and we'll get into some fun stuff.
Very nice.
I hope you stick around for that. But just give us kind of a wrap up. Today is Wednesday. Next Tuesday will be the hearing. What do we expect there?
Well, we expect, been hearing different things. It's going to be spring break, so we anticipate there's going to be a very long and deliberate push by some of the opponents to school choice on getting them mobilized in the legislature. And
is Randy Weingarten going to come back from the Ukraine to do this?
She might. Yeah.
Right. Very important.
But what we anticipate there to be a very robust hearing. Chairman Buckley is an all-star. He, all the members there we've heard this debate 4 times now, or it's going to be it's 5th time. Yeah. So. There's probably no new information that's actually going to come out. From there, we anticipate probably a week out from there that the House will take a committee vote to move forward with one of the school choice vehicles.
Okay, so that's important for our listeners. We're not expecting a vote next Tuesday after the debate. It'll be about a week before they finally vote.
Yes, and that's just traditional House tradition. Okay. Usually you wait a week before, which is something that the Senate has the luxury of not having to follow. But the House, yes, so just under House precedent, a week out. Then we anticipate there a couple. That's the chamber's prerogatives on how to move forward from there. But that's as far
Speaking
as
of political theatrics, then we'll go to the floor, and then that's when I guess the fun will happen.
Absolutely.
Oh, don't short sell the committee. I mean, you're very quick to mention of that one time Dracula testified. I think we're going to have
one time Dracula comes every session.
Well, to be fair, he's an invited witness because he has to be, or else he can't come in the building. But that being said, I think you're going to see some shenanigans on the committee side as well.
Absolutely.
And then so committee floor. Let's assume Chairman Buckley is confident that he has at least 77 votes, if not more. We'll see how the sausage all gets made. But that's not it then, right? Because SB2 and HB3 are not the same. So what happens then?
Yeah. What happens then? So if let's say HB3 and SB2, so they're going to do some procedural stuff to essentially get to consolidate the two pieces of legislation on the House side so that they only have to move one over to the Senate, the one that's already passed. And then they're going to go ahead and either agree with the changes that the House made or choose to go into what's called a conference committee. And if they form a conference committee, then there's a select body of members from the House and Senate who go and negotiate the differences between the two versions of the ESA bill, and then they'll come out with an official report. They'll basically tell their bodies and say, this is what the committee agreed upon, and then it goes to one final vote, a yes or no. We're supportive of adopting this report, and if it's a supporting vote, then it goes on and moves forward to the governor to his desk for him to sign, and we anticipate that to be the case.
So hopefully by I don't know, April, May. What do you think, Derek?
And George, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think it's outlandish to believe this could be buttoned up by mid-April, maybe mid to late April.
I would agree that's not outlandish. With something of this high of import, usually the traditional traditions of the chambers kind of fall by the wayside, and they focus on it. So, I'm optimistic that we might be able to get something by April. Might be a little bit longer. Just wait to see.
Yeah.
But either way, we're prepped here with NGT to provide support to.
Even if it takes all the way to late April, then we still have May.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's not the only thing. I mean, once we get past the emergency period, then it's a free for all in terms of like what committees can consider, and there's going to be legislation all the time. There are lots of votes on the House. My favorite times, when they have those quick votes on the House where they're constantly,
local consent.
All that stuff, which is a lot of fun to watch as well. All right, well, thank you, George, for all that good information. Of course, George is available online. You can ask him questions or troll him or send any kind of good vibes or hate his way. But he's very active on social media and is very good on social media and answering the haters, but also giving good information to people asking legitimate questions.
Our Twitter handle on this.
Yeah, we'll get your Twitter handle up at the end of the show. All right. Let's get into our 10-minute drill. We're still going to stick with education, so this is right up your alley. There was a big survey that came out this week, a big new poll that was put out by Texas Southern, the Texas Southern's Barbara Jordan Center for Research. And again, it just confirms what every other poll has said the last 5 years, which is that Texans, by and large, across the board, support school choice. I think the number was around 65% or so, almost 2/3 of the general public and Texans. What I thought was really interesting, which I'll highlight, are the various subgroups, because Texas Southern is, of course, a traditionally black college, and so they did an oversample of black Texans on that. And so we see that 69%, one of the highest groups that supports school choice, was 69% of black Texans. And even if you separate that out by Republican and Democrat, 67% of black Democrats support ESAs, 78% of Republicans. So for the folks who think that there's some sort of silent majority in the Republican Party who secretly oppose school choice, that is not the case. Very importantly, 65% of parents with school-age children, so 2/3 of parents with school-age children support ESAs, and then 59% of Latinos. Derek, any of that surprise you?
No, not at all. And in fact, I mean, I can appreciate, especially when you mentioned the 69% of Black Texans, 67% of Black Democrats, how they kind of map onto that. It's because these are communities that very well stand to benefit from that, or even if they're like don't directly benefit from that, they will also benefit from the change that attends it, whether it's the market change or the focus, or like George mentioned with the ratios. So, I mean, if I read this correctly in the crosstabs, if I read those correctly, the only people that didn't support it are white Democrat agnostic people, like
non-religious Democrats. Or
Yeah,
the only people for which there was a majority who didn't support it.
Well, that's the base, but then again, that's also, but that also shows that the Democrat Party is because they're gonna try to die on this hill, and from the looks of it, looks like the voters are probably going to oblige them in that case, because they are clearly not mirroring the interests of Texans, but maybe Texans who have something to do with school boards or architecture firms or something like that. They're not actually looking at the general voter.
George, there's pushback on this. Polls don't mean anything. What's really important is the hecklers at a town hall that we saw this week. Some of our members were open and wanted to talk about these big issues, and some of the Texas Ledge members had town halls, and instead of going and asking questions and listening respectfully to the answers and learning about the legislation, there was heckling going on and essentially shouting people down. That is the true heart of Texas, I guess, or the true opinions of Texans, according to.
And if there's a group that engages in that tactic more than others, who would it be? I guess we'll never know.
So, George, any surprises there that or anything to add on the Texas polling that you've seen?
Well, I mean, no, it's not surprising at all. I mean, the idea that Hispanic and Black Texans want the best education for their child being shocking is I mean, I don't know who that would be shocking to. It's all parents want the best for their children. Now, on the kind of because those town halls ended up being in more rural communities, one thing that is often, I think, underutilized in the school choice debate is the workforce component of it, right? So recently, I took a trip to Pearsall, Texas, right? A really small town up in Frio County. And you go down Main Street and they have an HVAC shop, they have a plumbing shop, and they have a electrician. And all of them have help wanted signs up and down their Main Street. And what school choice allows is if your ISD doesn't have those programs in your community, you could then use those ESA dollars and buy and purchase a class at a community college or a technical school to then have those to get that credential, and you could keep working in your community without having to go to UT or to TSTC up in Waco. You could stay in your community and you could graduate high school and start making $45,000-$50,000.
Yeah, well, we hear that from rural parents all the time, is that all the job opportunities, they go to UT or they go to SMU or TCU,
Yes.
and because the job opportunities, out of college are all there, they just stay. But you're saying, if you could go get, a degree to be an HVAC or work as a mechanic, all of those opportunities are actually back in their rural communities that are in high demand. And instead of walking out with $50,000 in debt and school debt, you can start making $70,000, right out of high school,
and be a business owner with it by 30, 35. Yeah.
All right, so lies, damn lies, and statistic. Our next segment, this is where we look at various reports and research from around the country in Texas. There was a new report that just came out from a group called Black Minds Matter, which I thought was pretty clever, on parental choice and Black empowerment. And they're looking at Florida. They're looking at low-income and African-American communities in Florida. Growing numbers of Black families in Florida, the most school choice rich state in America, continue to embrace school choice options beyond district schools. In 2023 and 24, the first year of universal school choice, over 142,000 Black students were enrolled in state-supported choice options beyond the district schools. That's more than 1 in 5 Black students in the state, and that's up 30,000 students from when it was not universal. So this is obviously Black parents are very supportive of school choice, and you're seeing this increase in numbers. The most important data in this report, however, is that the most recent achievement data shows that Black students in Florida charter schools continue to outperform their counterparts in district schools. So the performance is getting better. But meanwhile, Black public school students in Florida continue to rank in the top 5 in 4th grade reading and math nationally. And so that's a huge, and as you mentioned, that is a huge increase from where they were in the 1990s. So not only are the kids that are using choice options, in this case, Black students are using choice options, are improving the student achievement, but the kids who are still in public schools are in fact some of the best educated kids in the country. So thoughts on that report?
I mean, I'll give you general thoughts. I'm not surprised any of the findings at all. Again, kind of what I mentioned earlier, right, on what really led Ron DeSantis to go from a congressman to governor was school choice, and in particular the Black moms in Florida and how they were all in on supporting him because it's expanding the program. They saw the benefits. If a mom wasn't in the program, they had a friend who was in the program, and they saw how great the outcomes were for their child. And every parent, when they see something that benefits a friend of their child, they want to go ahead and try to do the same thing because they want the same benefits for their children. They won't always want to put their children in the best place to succeed in life. So again, I am not surprised by any of those findings.
Derek, before we finish up, just want to piggyback on that point. Efforts in Texas to make sure that parents know how to apply. I mean, this is going to be brand new for most people. And while certainly the issue and the ideas are not new, when it comes to actually, finding the right website or filling out the right forms. And, a lot of times, legislatures do great work in terms of, fixing policy and passing reforms, and then they turn it over to the agencies and, things get kind of dicey, or they don't do they don't promote it enough, or there's, certain issues with implementation. Are you confident, Texas is thinking about those things?
Absolutely. Now, are you suggesting that the ISDs are not going to advertise this program? So, I mean, huge if true. No, I think
not going to be in their budgets. Not going to be in their budgets.
It actually is, like it is currently. Much like they have funds for student enrollment. I also do think that some of the service providing organizations, correct me if I'm wrong, one of the things, or a partial expense that they're allowed to cover on their own behalf, is publicity. That being said, I don't even think that's going to be that necessary. This is the kind of thing that once word gets out of how it works, the lives that it changes, this is stuff that spreads like wildfire. I think that there can be like an ad campaign, if you will, to do this, but I think you're going to get far more traction with a couple dads at a bar, or moms at a grocery store just mentioning it in passing, than you're going to see from any concerted effort.
Yeah, the moms are doing something productive, but the guys are just watching a football game, having a beer, talking about school choice.
Do you not? That's all me and the boys talk about at the bar.
All right, George. Our final segment is called "What to Watch For" as we kind of look ahead. Obviously, we're the big committee hearing next week. So outside of that, Derek, I'll let you go first because I always steal the big one. What are you watching for over the next couple of weeks?
So what I'm watching for, in that vein and keeping it with the theme of the show, I am watching for additional signatories onto HB3. I'm looking for additional, basically people that are going to sign on as co-authors. But I also think that you're going to have some folks, and knock on wood, I think you're going to have some folks who don't sign on as a co-author but vote for the bill.
George,
you stole the one I was going to go with.
Oh, okay. Well, that's the problem with letting somebody go first. That's always the big one. But any questions in your mind as to kind of what's going to happen next week and things that you're watching?
What I'm watching is, and not for next week, and as things go on. One is if any other members join the dais on the during the debate, right? Because any member can join the dais and listen.
Subject to the chair.
Fair. But
I would be having a very neat dais where I
But really, what I'm paying attention to is the type of questions that certain members are asking, and if that might be an indication on which way they're leaning. And I'm talking more on some of the more moderate members on the Democratic side, some members that where their communities would be the ones that would best benefit from an ESA program. I'm thinking about some of the members in like Houston or in the Valley, in particular El Paso, seeing if there's any type of dialogue that would spur them or to think about this a little more critically, other than the red and blue issue.
Yeah, I mean, we've heard rumors, but also we've seen members say it generally in public. Like some of them are saying, look, this thing's going to pass. Get what you can, and so maybe some of their questions or maybe some of the amendments or things that they might propose would indicate that they're essentially done. They've sort of accepted that the bill's going to pass and that we're going to have ESAs, and can they get their pound of flesh essentially, from whatever passes.
The only thing I would highlight about that is you got 76, 77 on the bill as is. So Chairman Buckley can be very judicious when it comes to people approaching him with, "Oh, I could vote for this if you take this amendment." I'd kindly thank them and send them on their way back to their machine.
Agreed.
Yeah, and that's why there's a huge push for no Derek chairs in the legislature.
Could you imagine? I mean, obviously we have some chaos agents in the legislature, but this bad?
Yeah. Well, y'all both definitely stole mine. So, what am I watching for? I am watching for good examples to once again prove that our committee system is broken and that they should not allow just anybody to go into the committees. That in fact we need to have more responsible discussions in those committee
hearings. We need
hearings.
to be more like Washington.
Yeah, the only way I'll say we ever say that we'll need to be more like Washington is because of our broken committee process. So I'll be if Dracula or Little Bo Peep, if you're out there, come on in, because I'll be able to clip that and send it to y'all and say this is why we shouldn't do this.
Yeah,
we have Dracula coming in for a layout later this week.
Right. You're against 22-hour long meetings?
If it was 22 hours of substance, fine. If it's the same 100,000 people coming in saying the same talking points and then all this crazy dressing up like Little Bo Peep and whatever else.
Everyone got these, like, I come from Crimger, man. Like,
yeah,
y'all don't know. I have one up to the building when the sun was up and left when the sun came back up the next day.
But you don't have that job anymore. That's Andrew's problem.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well, Jorge Borrego, who directs our K-12 policy here at TPPF, this has been super informative and a lot of fun. So thanks for being with us today.
Thank you all for having me.
And thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. And as we always like to say at the end of the show, in the immortal words of Sam Houston, do good and risk the consequences. We'll see you next time.